The topic that we have for discussion is entitled From Civil Rights to Pan-Africanism. Of course, I understand the intent of the topic, but you know, Malcolm X said it was not a question of civil rights, it was a question of human rights. So I do think that this direction we must bear in mind. Of course, most of the books write about civil rights, but most of the books are not even written by those who are Africans or those who even participated in the struggle. For those who usually write without participation, I think the Chinese have a good axiom. They say, no participation, no right to observation. Chinese. So we will nonetheless stay within the topic, but not using the precise terms, try to direct our remarks to that area. We could generally say from the 1960s to the 1990s, if you will. Of course, even in saying from the 1960s to 1990s, we must declare that we're only speaking of a small period in the continual struggle of all of humanity, and especially that suffering part of humanity, Africans. Of course, now most of our remarks will be geared towards Africans, and if one is not careful in this capitalist system, one will be a racist and think that one is not a racist. The other day, while discussing with a man who said he hadn't seen me in some years, he said, Kwame Ture, I haven't seen you in a long time. They say you're in Africa, is that right? I said, yes, sir. He said, you just stay in Africa? I said, yes, sir, I'm there in Africa. He said, just working for them, what you doing there? I said, same thing, sir, just trying to make revolution. That's all.
Yes, sir.
It's my responsibility. He said, just in Africa? I said, yes, sir, just in Africa. He said, you care just about Africans? Well, not really, but you can say that more or less. He said, well, you work just for them. I said, well, that's true, yes. Just for them I work for. He said, well, you just care about Africans. I said, well, all right, more or less you can say that. He said, you see, I knew you were racist. I said, He said, no, you're a racist. He said, me? I said, of course. Africans are part of suffering humanity. Anytime you benefit any part of suffering humanity, you benefit all of humanity. All right. So while in fact we speak mainly of Africans and the struggle of Africans, we know, even if others do not, that Africans represent humanity. So if others do not know that Africans represent humanity and think the struggles of Africans is apart from them, then we hope to at least enlighten them, to let them know not only an African's part of humanity, but in America, Africans decide the struggle for everybody. Everybody. Since the 1960s, I mean, there have been groups participating everywhere in struggle, and all these groups owe their thanks to the African masses in this country who by themselves and themselves alone were taking on this country in the 1960s. Even the handicapped must thank the Africans in this country. It is the Africans who showed them and even showed them the way to come and impose themselves upon the people, making people have responsibility towards them. America tried to be a pretty country, hide them in the 60s in bedrooms and in nursing homes, but they broke out thanks to the 1960s. So we also want to tell you one thing now. We are Africans and we know our culture, we know our people's victory, we are proud of our people, and we know our history is made only by our people. These aspects must be properly understood. They're just certain assumptions that we make. But of course it has to do even in the capitalist presentation of history. Whenever capitalism presents history to the students, it's to demobilize the students. In the first effect, it's always presented something dead, something in the past, some names and some dates, and usually it's made only by one great individual. Thus the student absorbing this interpretation of history, knowing that's in the past, they're living in the present, knowing that it's dates and they're living in the present, knowing that that a great person, do not even try to make history. But every living human being makes history, either consciously or unconsciously. And oppressed people, unconsciously making history, will make the history of their enemy. Consciously, they will make their history in fighting against the enemy. For example, an African who goes to fight in Baghdad is a stupid African. This African is making America strong. It's a stupid African. An African who refuses to fight in the American Armed Force is an intelligent African. Here, not to let you think that we're speaking rhetoric, is only to show you some of the contradictions existing for the Africans, as you can see clearly. Africans have shed more blood out of proportion to their numbers in this country fighting to defend this country than any other ethnic group in the country. Africans have been more killed inside this country by terrorist groups such as the police and the KKK than any other ethnic group in the country. These facts are there and clear for all to see. These contradictions will be resolved, that you must be certain. Our statement that they will be resolved has to do with our proper comprehension of the nature of human beings. Capitalism, of course, will try to confuse us. But we know that all human beings have an instinctive love of justice. Instinctive. And this instinctive love of justice reaches heightened proportions when the masses of the people are oppressed. I mean, it's instinctive. Capitalism will try to let you think that these people's quest for justice can be quenched by long periods of oppression. Nothing is further from the truth. Here, the Irish come to give us a sterling example, as sterling as the British pound used to be. Here, the Irish have been struggling for 800 years to put British imperialism out of their land. And we assure every human being that if the British occupy Ireland for another 800 years, the Irish will fight them for another 800 years, put them out, and unite their country. This instinctive love of justice, we say, is not caused by time. We could bring you the situation right here. The indigenous people of this country, commonly called Indians, are fighting right now. Just because CNN is not there doesn't mean it doesn't happen. While we sit here tonight, some of their bravest warriors are found throughout the length and breadth of the prisons of this country. One in particular, just to give you a name, that of Leonard Peltier, who sits in jail for 18 years in this country because he dared to defend the rights of his people to reclaim their lands. Leonard Peltier rots in jail, just like his ancestors rotted in jail, and we promise you that more will rot in jail because as long as they're alive, the struggle will continue. Thus, our aspect here is clear. We show that all people have an instinctive love of justice in their struggle. Of course, human beings are not animals and cannot struggle on the instinctive level. Of course, human beings must have all their instincts under all conditions properly guided and directed by reason. Otherwise, one acts like an animal. Irrespective of whether this instinct is a positive instinct or a negative instinct, speaking ethically. For example, human beings have lust. If one doesn't control lust with reason, one goes to an animal, one rapes. So it is that human beings have an instinctive love of justice. But if one doesn't govern this with reason, one too, like an animal, will wait until backed against the wall and just come out wildly striking at anything. Thus, the necessity to have this reason, especially the reason, the instinctive love of justice, this instinct be directed by reason is clear. Without it being directed by reason, human beings will never achieve their liberation. This instinctive love of justice has a historical basis to it, and is common for all of humanity. If you would look at the early days of that blood-dripping system, capitalism, in Britain, where it showed its ugly head, you will see that the British workers, having been driven off of their lands as peasants by the British capitalists, found themselves in factories. They knew they were exploited. They felt their exploitation, and they had an instinctive love of justice, but they couldn't analyze properly. Based on instinct, they came to look at the situation in which they found themselves, and the new apparatus that was sure to be the source of their exploitation were the machines. They smashed the machines. If you will look at the early history of the British working class, you will see everywhere they smashed machines. We can understand this. After all, the people are exploited, and they must rise up. But the British working class made great errors in their instinctive drive against capitalism. It's not the machines that have to be smashed, it's capitalism that will be smashed. Thus here, this aspect of reasoning must be proper. We are giving it first in a general atmosphere to direct it clearly to the African masses as part of all of humanity. Thus we know that people everywhere will fight. Certainly the Africans are the best example. If you want to see this instinctive love of justice which these Africans have, just in America, irrespective of the forces that they're up against, we can system, victory is inevitable. Our task is to look at the movement of the 60s and qualify the movement for the 90s. This aspect of qualifying ourselves is clear in all aspects of life. Frederick Douglass here gave us a clear axiom. Where there is no struggle, said he, there is no progress. The statement must be fully comprehended, because the contrary of the statement is true. Where progress is to be made, struggle has to be. Without struggle, there is no progress. Even you as students probably understand this. If you as a freshman come into your biology class and you do not struggle with the concepts of biology to master them, you will never learn biology through osmosis, only through struggle. And we assure you, the student who struggles with the most difficult concepts of biology, the student who struggles the hardest with biology will be the best student in biology. Thus, we come to tell you from the very beginning that we smash here all backward capitalist ideas. They tell you as students that, well, when you're a student, you must work hard, but after you get your diploma, you can relax and enjoy life. Any human being who looks for a period of relaxation knows nothing of life. I will struggle until I die. And not only will I struggle until I die, I no longer look for easy struggle. I look only for difficult struggle. Understanding the more difficult the struggle, the stronger the warrior who has conquered the objective in his path. And Africans need strong people. Consequently, it must be properly understood what we're saying here. For you, there will be no chance to think of resting. I passed on to you what my father told me. When I used to say, why you work so hard? He said, it's for you. I said, but rest a while. When I die, I will have enough time to rest. So, for you, there's nothing but struggle, and you should look for nothing but struggle. The human body is just a wonderful piece of machinery. It can be trained to do anything. If I'm used to sleeping 10 hours a day and working 4 hours, the day I sleep 4 hours and work 10 hours, I'll be totally disoriented. If I'm used to sleeping 4 hours a night and working 10 hours, the day I reverse it, I'll be totally disoriented. Because the human body is a wonderful piece of machinery. It must be made as an effective tool in the struggle for the advancement of humanity. Thus the individual themselves, but at every level, seek to make their body, this perfect instrument of struggle, more perfect by combating and looking for struggle. So to those who thought, and many of them did, that after the 1960s we would be free, and now you hear the member, oh, after the 1960s, it seems like racism didn't go anywhere. It's still raising its head. Did you think you could sit down? It shows a total lack of comprehension. For some, it's even disgraceful. You know, in any army in the world, a deserter can be shot. Any army. Yeah, we have deserters to our people's army, and not only do they desert, but they brag about it. In the 1960s, I was out there. You should see what I was doing. What you doing now? Nothing. Shut up, you deserter. Shoot you. This is one of the things that we must come to qualify from the 1960s, the eternal nature of struggle. Indeed, some even thought that struggle was a student thing. After student life, you didn't have to struggle anymore. Such stupidity, reactionary garbage spewed out everywhere for the people. Thus, if you are to learn anything about the transformation of the movement from the 1960s to 1990s, this struggle is eternal. And not only is it eternal, if you do not intend to get up and struggle for the rest of your life, it's better that you sit down and not confuse your people and let them think you're part of the army. This is a fact. As a matter of fact, rising up and sitting down will compromise the behavior of future generations who will question, indeed, your behavior. That you came to fight for the people voluntarily. You promised to go down, to do everything necessary, and before the victory was arrived at, and the people is still in a state of suffering, you quit. This must be clearly understood, this eternal nature of struggle. The second aspect that we must come to qualify from the 1960s is that the struggle for power is just that, a struggle for power. Dr. Martin Luther King, a great man, but as that great Pan-Africanist, Secretary Ray, comes to remind us, the only man that doesn't make a mistake is a man who does nothing. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and if I live, I should make a lot more because I will do a lot more. look at the rendition that American capitalism gives us of this history of this one man fighting, why, the answer is given to us by KRS themselves in their Boogie Down Productions. They give the example of George Washington. They say you can take George Washington, as bad as he is, put him in the middle of Valley Forge by himself, surrounded by the British. He can do absolutely nothing. Hope he knows how to swim underwater. But if you take the same George Washington and surround him with thousands of people, these thousands of people having the same idea that he does, no taxation without representation, determined to make these ideas a reality, irrespective of the consequences, irrespective of the means, the situation changes drastically. What changes the situation? Not Washington, but the thousands of nameless, faceless human beings who come at the drop of a hat to shed their blood to advance humanity, always, everywhere. It's the people and the people alone who make history. We say this lesson may be lost on others, but it can never be lost on Africans, not them. No individual advancement in this country has been made by any individual African unless through the shedding of the blood of the masses of our people. We say not one individual advancement. As a matter of fact, the statement we make all the time is correct. No one sitting in this audience can show me one example where even an individual African has advanced without the shedding of the blood of the masses of our people. The vicious of the system can be easily seen here, and the necessity for eternal struggle and for struggle by any means necessary is clear before our eyes. For Africans to sit in a filthy 5 and 10 cent store, they must shed their blood. For them to sit on a bus where they want to sit, even though they pay the same money like everybody else, they must shed their blood. For them to live in a neighborhood where they want to live, even if they have the amount of money, they must shed their blood. For them to get their votes just like any immigrant gets, they must shed their blood. Indeed, even to get their universities, to get their students into the universities, they must shed their blood, and to keep them there, they must shed their blood. There's no advancement that any African in this country has made without the shedding of blood. The vicious of the capitalist system can be seen here. We are the only people in the world who shed our blood to make reform. The necessity of understanding revolution rings clear. Indeed, it's clear and logical. If we must shed our blood for every little thing we do in America, let us collect ourselves, shed our blood one time, make revolution, and march on. The qualification then of the movement from the 1960s to 1990s is clear. Since the history is there for all of us to see. Of course, one point must be clear, again, is this capitalist system, talking nonsense about the individual. Some even think the individual is more important than the group, but stupidity. Indeed, any human being who thinks that he's more important than the group is thinking and acting just like an animal. It's only an animal by itself can develop its speed, its potential. No human being isolated from the human species can develop to its fullest human potential. As a matter of fact, pushing the point to its clearest logical conclusion, a human being isolated from the human species is more stupid than an animal isolated from its species. Biological examples exist. You can take a puppy the minute it's born, you can take a kitten the minute it's born, you can take a human being the minute it's born, and before them, seeing their species, put them to live with monkeys. The dog will grow up with the monkeys. He will walk on all four just like a dog. He will even bark. The first time he sees a bone, he will go chase it, eat it, and enjoy it. The cat will walk like a cat on all four. The cat will meow, and the cat, the first time he sees mice, will chase it, play with it, and eat it. But the child will walk like a monkey, talk like a monkey, eat monkey food, and make a contribution to monkey culture. Thus it is clear, human beings learn by imitation, and thus no human being can learn by themselves. They can only learn within the society. Thus the necessity for the society itself to be the true regulator of equality and not the individual. Especially for Africans, this individual nonsense should be wiped out. Do you know that if I go downtown here tonight and I pour a brick and bottle into a store, any one of you are liable to get whooped over the head by the police? you're not doing physics, you're only thinking, you're thinking about physics. If you are not involved in your people's struggle, you cannot think about your people's struggle. This point must be properly understood. There are many who think that since they saw movies in the 60s about the movement, that they can think about it. No, you have to be involved in it. It's only when you're involved in something that you can think clearly about it. Thus, this abstract nonsense imposed upon you at these universities where your bourgeois scholars in the league of capitalism are to be found in a vast number must not confuse you. The only way you can think about something is when you're involved in it. And the only way you can think about your people's struggle is when you're involved in it. The only way you can think about advancing humanity, the only way you can think about bringing peace is when you're involved in the struggle to advance humanity and the struggle to bring peace. Thus, if one is not involved in these struggles, one cannot think about it. This mistake must be clear. We're speaking here of qualifying our movement since the 1960s. We didn't think it would worth time for us to specify all that went on because we assume you have some general understanding of your people's history. Boss, the assumption can't be incorrect, I know. So a man the other day told me, I love Dr. King. You love Dr. King? I love Dr. King. I have nothing I wouldn't do for Dr. King. How many books by Dr. King have you read? That's all right, I love Dr. King. The same question asked at a broad level will be seen. I'm sure if I asked every African in this room, how many of you love your people? Every hand must go up. How many of you know the history of your people? Read it constantly seek to know it. And we love our people, Brother Kwame. All right. But you cannot love your people unless you know your people and want to know everything there is to know about your people. Do you know that if you love a little brother on the campus, you want to know everything about him? Who was he with before me? What'd y'all do? If this is only one person and you say you love your people, then you want to know the entire history of your people. The movement of the 1960s did not seek properly a clear understanding of struggle. Indeed, it is since the 60s that the struggle has progressed. You must not believe this nonsense about since the 60s ain't nobody been doing nothing. You can say you ain't been doing nothing. Yes, you can say that clearly, but you can never say, since the 60s, our struggle has been clarifying itself in a speed that shocks us. We know today that one seriously cannot speak of struggle unless one speaks of history. For the Africans in America, this is crucial. Their history has been completely cut off. So cut off that some of them even begin their history in 1619. Can you believe that? Beginning your history in slavery. All people are born free. All people, they are oppressed by others. And people who find themselves oppressed, looking for inspiration to struggle, cannot look back to their origins in slavery. They must look back to their origins when they were free, which will inspire them to fight oppression to bring them to a higher qualified state of freedom. It is fair for Africans in this country, indeed all over the world, the only place they can begin their history is in Africa. Of course, we know all the lies that have been told about Africa. You know, capitalism, some people get confused, especially some Africans. They don't think capitalism lies all the time. They think it lies some of the time. But it doesn't lie some of the time. It lies all of the time. When it tells the truth, it's a result of a double lie. What they have done with the history of Africa is pathetic. We will not waste time going through all of it. We only point out the great contributions of Africa. We'll highlight just one area to show you how irresponsible the capitalist system makes you. Totally irresponsible. Totally irresponsible. If you will look properly at African history, or if you will take just a cursory glance at Africa's history, you will see that monotheism, belief in one God, was given to the world by Africa. The first chronological religion, speaking about belief in one God, the first chronologically speaking, the first religion preaching monotheism was Judaism. And this was born in Africa, and this is Africa's gift to the world. Some really get confused, not even knowing this. But a cursory glance at history will convince us of this. Africa was the only place in the world speaking of belief in one God, monotheism. To the east of Africa, they were worshiping the sun. To the north of Africa, in Palestine, they were worshiping idols and will stay doing that until the Prophet Muhammad came in the 6th century to civilize them and teach them monotheism. Because it's only in Africa that Judaism could have been developed. As a matter of fact, the Bible and the Torah gives you clear examples here. In the Bible, they tell you that Moses married an Ethiopian woman by the Students must be conscious. They can never swallow whole anything presented to them. Their job is to test these values, see if they're correct. Do they advance humanity or retard humanity? If they retard humanity, they must be trampled into the ground without pity and without mercy. This aspect then is clear. Most Africans in America call themselves Christians. Call themselves Christians. They don't read the Bible. They don't read the Bible at all. Carried under their arms every Sunday. Don't read it. Indeed, any Christian who read the Bible would have to have the greatest respect for Africa. I hear one man call himself a born-again Christian. I ask him, what do you think about Africa? He said, I don't know too much about Africa. You ain't no Christian. You ain't no Christian. I say any Christian must respect Africa. When Jesus Christ was in trouble, peace be upon his name, and everyone was trying to kill him, it was Africa that gave him refuge. It was in Africa that he grew in his youth. It was Africa that trained him politically, intellectually, and spiritually for his later mission. I thought it was only in Africa that there was monotheism. Anyone looking properly at the history of Christianity, and I assume that if one is a Christian, they would want to know the history of Christianity. Do you know we have some brothers and sisters on this campus who are members of fraternities and sororities and also Christians, but they know more about the history of the fraternity and the sorority than they do about Christianity. The first church in the world came out of Africa. The first monastery in the world came out of Africa. The very intellectual development of the church came out of Alexandria, which is in Egypt, but still it's in Africa. Anyone knowing properly the history of Christianity and the history of Jesus Christ will know that it took 400 years after the death of Jesus Christ for Christianity to reach Europe. 400 years. Yet all these African churches I visit from Africa through the Caribbean into South America and the United States of America, they all have a white Jesus up on their board. Well, my problem is not to quibble about the color of Jesus Christ. We say it all the time, but the statement we make is a correct statement. Jesus Christ could have been just about any color, but the one color he definitely could not be is the one they always painted. I'm willing to bet you that if tomorrow night there's a racist incident on campus between a white student and a sister, every African on this campus will get hot for 2 weeks. I mean, seriously, we gotta do something. Take over the administration. Do something. Or they'll be hot. And 2 weeks later, they will sit down and wait until another incident. Then they will get up, get hot, sit down, and wait for another incident. This is clear, backwards way of struggle. People who come to struggle against the enemy must not let the enemy provoke them into struggle. They must plan this aggressively. They must come to examine properly the enemy, see what are his weak points, see what are his strong points. Look at the people, see their weak points, see their strong points. Take the strong points of the people, head it against the weak points of the enemy, wear down the strong points of the enemy, build up the weaknesses of the people. It's a scientific process. This scientific process must be properly comprehended. Indeed, this is our biggest weakness as a people. We are the only people in the world who can rise up in one weekend against the largest imperialist power in the world, the United States of America, burn down 260 of their cities, and sit down for 20 years. The reason is clear. We have unity of action, we lack unity of thought. When one speaks of eternal struggle, it is thought that guides one to eternal struggle. No Christian sitting here thinks that Christianity will disappear tomorrow. They think Christianity will be here forever. Even if Christians do not have unity of action, they have unity of thought, even generally speaking, in their beliefs. What we Africans must have is unity of thought. Indeed, this unity of action without unity of thought puts us into a very perilous condition. The white left in this country comes all the time to give us their theory based on our action. Here, there is a compounded. In the first place, all struggling people can only struggle from their culture. Here as well. All struggling people can only struggle from their culture. And Africans in this country have a different culture from the American capitalist culture. Not only different, in constant conflict with it. Some get confused. The job of the enemy, of course, is clear. The job of the enemy is to make you think that your history is his history. The job of the enemy is to make you think that your culture is his culture. But if you have the same culture with the enemy, on what basis can you fight the enemy? Indeed, when you have an enemy, you must be alienated from every aspect of life of the enemy. You must have total hatred for every aspect of life. If you like something that the enemy has, you're finished. He'll get you on that. Brother told me the other day, he said, you know, I want to work for my people, but also want to make some more money. They give you all the money you want. You never think about your people. When you hate an enemy, when you have an enemy, you must know the enemy and hate everything about the enemy. Oh, I think we should have a good life. Make the dollar. The dollar came into the world dripping in blood. It stays dripping in blood. Anybody seeking to get the dollar cannot seek liberation. This is clear. Crystal clear. So here one must be clear on this struggle. It is our culture, and Africans have a culture, and our culture is different from them. And if we do not know the difference of this culture, we find confusion everywhere. I do not forget, some years ago, at an international conference, an international socialist conference, a young white man from the United States made a presentation at the conference. I was there. He gave a whole presentation of America politically. And he said, and you should have seen the area of 1954 in America. He said the communists were running for cover. We were oppressed by everybody. Everybody was running. He gave this whole theory about the MacArthur area and showed that every African, every party in America was running for MacArthur. He finished. When he was finished, I had to make a presentation. I came. I said, maybe everybody in America was scared of communism, but one people I know were never scared of it were my people, the Africans. Anyone knowing our history will know we were never scared of communism. In fact, the Communist Party built itself off of our backs, from the Scottsboro Boys to Angela Davis. These are clear for all to see. We've never been afraid of it. But you get your culture confused, your politics will be confused. Let me give you a clear example of today. We said in the very beginning, and we're correct, every group struggling in this country since the 60s must thank us. This is a fact. You must know your history and you must know your victories. The enemy will cheat you with victories all the time. But you must know your victories. Since the 1960s, the gay liberation movement has surfaced in this country. In the 1970s, the white left came to see our party, the All African I made our presentation. We sat quietly, and then the meeting, we left. Some weeks later, they sent a white youth, very intelligent, was most emotional, to come and speak to us. He said, we haven't seen you out there, and you know you should be out here. And you know, this is a struggle. He said that. And you know everybody's involved in the struggle. Everybody. You're not the only one not involved. You're Farrakhan. We here are revolutionaries, not reformists. We fight for our culture, and we know our culture. The problem of homosexual rights, the problem of gay dissolution, gay liberation, is a solution seeking a problem. The problem that exists is intolerance of homosexuality in the white community. As a matter of fact, Europe, if you look at her, has a history of bloody internecine conflict over the problems of homosexuality. But in the African community, homosexuality, there's no intolerance here to that. You've never seen any homosexual brains bashed in the African community. Bashing in the brains of homosexuality in our community is as foreign to our culture as lynching a white man. We give examples everywhere. You will look in our community and you will find the organization taking the hardest line against homosexuality is that of the Nation of Islam. You hear Minister Farrakhan say, you better tell them to straighten up their wrists. Even Malcolm X. But if you will look carefully at our struggle, you will see that James Baldwin, who was a homosexual and never hid it, played a crucial role not only in our struggle, but was praised both by Malcolm X and by Minister Louis Farrakhan. If you do not know your culture, you get confused. So you think that you got American culture, you think you got American problems. I told that white left, I said, listen, we got problems, you got problems. Understand? Don't you bring yours here, and I won't bring mine too. Those are problems we have you can't deal with, you understand? That's not a problem for us. African culture is tolerant. As a matter of fact, that's how we ended up here. Because of our tolerance. Could you imagine what would have happened if Chief Crazy Horse tried to discover England? We never let him off the boat. You must know properly your culture and understand it is from your culture that you will fight. For them to come and tell me that we have this nonsense. I remember as a young tough in Harlem, we used to go to the Audubon Ballroom where Malcolm was assassinated, to Rockland Palace. And every once a year, homosexuals, African homosexuals from all over America would come there, dress up like women, and they'd have a big ball. And none of us young toughs even thought of bashing in their brains. It is not in our culture. You must know your culture. So now here they're telling us, and you know, if you want money in this African community from the white left, all you got to do is say, you're going to build a gay liberation studio, or they give you all the money you want. It's not our problem. We must know what our problems are. We must understand properly our culture. This aspect of understanding the culture calls for a great clarification and qualification of our movement since the 60s. So it is to be found even in the problem of women's oppression. Some may get confused here. All women are oppressed all over the world. This is clear. And African men oppress their women. This is clear. But for one place African men cannot oppress their women is on the front lines fighting for us. If you know nothing about the history of women, you will know the names of African women who've been fighting. From the first queens in Africa, through Nzinga, to Harriet Tubman, to Sojourner Truth, to Assata Shakur, to Angela Davis. That's it. We can oppress them in the bedroom, we can oppress them in the kitchen, we can oppress them in the garbage. But when it comes to fighting for the people, we cannot hold them back. They are always on the front line. Fourier and Saint-Simon, to whom Marx gave a scientific basis. I am neither French, English, nor German, and all three oppressed me. I'd be stupid to look for them for the path of my liberation. This aspect of understanding the culture must be clear. Let me give you an example. We have given an example of Africa's relationship to